Welcome to another episode of PTR Perspective. We are continuing our discussions at Green Auto Summit in Stuttgart, Germany. And my next guest is Andreas Blin, who is Director Segments and Partnerships at ChargePoint. Welcome to the podcast, Andreas.
Thank you very much for having me.
Just a quick introduction about yourself. I'm sure that our listeners and viewers already know about ChargePoint, but maybe your journey with ChargePoint and about yourself.
Absolutely. So my name is Andreas Blin. I'm responsible at ChargePoint for the segment of CPOs, solution partners, and fuel and convenience. These are customers that we serve with a special platform that we have in our product portfolio, the Be Energized platform. We also have other platforms in our portfolio and other products. I myself have been in the EV industry for roughly 6 years now. By education, I'm a plastics engineer, so I did sell large machines to produce plastic film and other plastic products before, via a short stint in the cheese making industry, I found the EV charging industry, and it found me. And since then, I've been selling software and services to large CPOs, MSPs all over Europe, and we're also starting to look into other geographies as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Andreas. First question that I'm asking everyone about year 2024 for e-mobility industry. Slowdown in growth, slowdown in sales. How do you see this and where are we headed?
So I believe that 2024 is a very difficult year, but I also perceive it as an episode. In Europe, particularly, for example, in Germany and also in Austria, there have been elections, and the political climate was not always that easy. And there's a lot of people who just don't believe in the EV charging and in the EV mobility industry. And also, the United States is facing elections, so I perceive this as an episode.
I see.
And also, it's interesting that within Germany and Austria, the press has been very bad. And also there has been a slowdown in new car sales for EVs. But outside of Germany and Austria, and the EVs have been growing. And overall in Europe, they've been growing as well. So this is going to be fast.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to manipulate numbers. It's very easy to use numbers and data to tell the perspective and story that you want to tell. And you're absolutely right that when you look at the data country-wise, then it's quite clear that it's obviously, Germany showed negative growth, but then, rest of the countries, it was all positive.
Absolutely. And then if you think, again, I think it's also a lot of political aspects in that game. So for example, in Austria, before the European Union elections, so the elections for the European Parliament, I think 8 days before the election, there was a hydrogen summit. All of a sudden, hydrogen again. So political things coming back and forth. But of course, also, we are not in the easiest of economic times, and investments are difficult to justify. We have a certain amount of interest that has to be paid. Capital is scarce. So it's not only on the investment side sometimes difficult, but also, of course, in the EV industry itself.
So political landscape's changing, there's some manipulation, the way people are telling the story, and then overall there is a economic slowdown, especially from automotive perspective. As you said, new car sales are essentially, overall the automotive sector is not, let's say, in the best place right now. So that these are all the factors contributing.
Absolutely. But I think all of this is going to be passing, and 2025 is going to look very different.
Perfect. Next question I had, Andreas, was about different applications, home versus fleet, public versus private charging, different solutions are out there, AC, DC, fast, ultra fast charging, megawatt charging, however you want to call it. Is there going to be a winner? Is there going to be a mix? If yes, what kind of mix should we expect moving forward? So how do you see this?
So there is going to be a winner, and the winner is going to be electrification. That's for sure. There is a multitude of application, and people tend to look at mobility as just one application. But within mobility, you have several dozens of different applications who all have their individual needs and requirements. So if we look at every single every single use case that you mentioned, there is, for every niche, there's going to be an individual solution, and we provide software and hardware solutions for every single of these use cases. just to make one thing clear, we're never the CPO ourselves. We're an enabling company. We provide a platform, hardware and software for other people and other companies to become EV charging companies. But looking at, so you mentioned home. Yeah? Interesting that it's still home and workplace is 80% of charging sessions still today. So when we talk about public charging, we're only talking about 20% of charging sessions that are actually on the market, so to speak. So home and workplace is a very important factor. Here it's always about, when we talk about small vehicles or passenger vehicles, it's mostly AC, because in this case the dwell time is very long. We talk about take-home fleet, it's the similar use case. When you talk about DC charging, I mean, we all know when you're on the road, you want to charge your car as fast as possible. So DC is the system of choice. And then when we go further up into megawatt charging, you heard today the presentation how what we do very often triggers emotions in us who are from the e-mobility industry. It all triggers positive emotions and a let's get going feeling. And in many people who have driven diesels all their life and think that and are afraid for whatever reason, it triggers negative emotions. So when you look at trucks and you look at fleet, these are people who don't have emotions when it comes to mobility. They talk about total cost of ownership, they talk about practicability, they talk about pricing, about reliability. So as soon as you get into that realm, and I've just been to a conference in France where we were talking about these things, and there it's all very, very dry cost, reliability discussions. So the winner is going to be the electrification of the mobility. It's our job to provide the right equipment and the right software and the right for every single use case.
Let's talk about the power of software. Recently, we heard about NL in the US, and I read several posts on Reddit. I'm a big follower of Reddit. I'm part of a lot of Reddit communities, and a lot of end users were complaining. And then I learned that the amount of the dependability that everyone has, the end user has on the software features.
Yes.
You would say that home application is probably the most simplest, compared to other applications. One would consider that, but the amount of dependence that every end user had from those discussions, I was amazed. So maybe walk us through the power of software. This concept that EV charging, software plus hardware is the solution, and without software, there's no solution. You only have, maybe some patchwork can be done without a good software solution. So walk us through the power of software and also different applications, home versus fleet. Take home fleet, you mentioned, what are the different aspects or features one would require through software for different applications?
How much time do you have? We have 24 hours or something. So basically, a charging station is nothing else but an electric plug. At first, it's just a plug. It might have a higher rating, so I don't have a plug at home that delivers 150 kilowatts, and also not 300. But at the end, it's just a plug. Yeah. And everything that provides value to anyone in the value chain is only coming through software. It's only coming through data. The electron is the same when it was produced wherever until it gets into the car and is consumed. It's the same electron. There's no value added to it. So anything that I want to do with a charging station, be it at home, be it in the public sphere, I need it to be connected. That's the simplest. Even for the simplest use case of, I want to know how much you charge so that I can send you an invoice. Without software, that's not possible. That's not possible. And that's the simplest case. And now we get into the fact that I want to provide value. So I want to provide you as a driver with a driver experience. So I need to provide you with the possibility to find the charger, to operate the charger, to know whether it's occupied, to know what it's going to cost. All of that has nothing to do with the actual charger itself. So the experience comes from I'm trying to get reliability done. I need to have KPIs. All the data is coming from different protocols. So software is the key that holds everything together. Hardware is just the extension out into the market. That's the key thing that people need to understand. And then when we come to the different use cases, again, you're referring to NLX getting out of the market and these things. So here we come into a different question. So again, the fact that software needs to be there and software needs to work remains. In this case, it's about software in order to work needs protocols, needs handshakes, needs unified communication pattern. So in that case, everything we do at ChargePoint relies on the OCPP protocol for the communication between the backend and the charging station. And anybody who is investing into hardware that cannot be on-ramped later on, it's a decision that needs to be made. Yeah? So OCPP is particularly in the Be-Energized world something that is key. Also, when we talk about building up the infrastructure, roaming infrastructure, charging infrastructure on a bigger picture, again, we have to stick to protocols, OCPI and so on, to make sure that we provide a good charging experience.
With all this, thank you so much, Andreas. With all this control and all this value, that's the perfect word that you described it with, that you can only provide value through software. Because I hear a lot of different use cases, through software and through, collecting all the data about the chargers. You can perform maintenance, predictive maintenance has been discussed a lot. The other day, I looked at some stats from a company that said that they're able to monitor their chargers and they're able to solve 2/3 of their problems without even sending anyone to the field, because they are able to monitor, they're able to see what's happening, what's wrong. So they can do a lot of corrective preventive maintenance and maintenance on the go. So walk us through some of the innovations, some of the solutions from ChargePoint that you're bringing to the table, especially with this power of software.
Yeah. So again, let's separate two kinds of data pools. The one data is the one about chargers. When we talk about maintenance, I'll get to that very soon. And the other one is about the charging sessions. Yeah. So we'll look at these two separately. On the chargers, I'm surprised. I think 2/3 of cases solved remotely is very low. Yeah. I would expect that 2/3 of cases are solved without any human involvement. So we are working on mechanisms that see what's going on in the data stream coming from the chargers and start to act from the system itself using AI.
Okay.
Yeah, using AI to say, if I know this charger, if it does this, that, and the other thing, the next step is so it's going to go offline, so I can do something up front, and there's no human involvement necessary. We have also launched with ChargePoint a system where we use AI even further. So if somebody sends a picture of a charger via the ChargePoint app, AI can determine what's actually wrong with the charger. So if there's a cable missing, AI can tell you, okay, that's vandalism or whatever, but you can see, it can analyze the picture. These are things that are coming, okay, so that we can, get the picture of a charger that's standing at one of our customer sites. The picture, AI says cable's missing. We can send somebody who's got the right tools and everything. So these things are coming and these things are done. We solve, if I'm not mistaken, 92 to 93% of problems with hardware problems with chargers remotely. Not yet via AI, but that must be the goal. The goal must be that no case is touched by a human that hasn't been looked at by artificial intelligence first.
Right. And what about the other data pool that you mentioned? About the charging. Are there?
Yeah. Well, that's of course a constant source of interesting stuff that's going on. So with the data of charging, again, we have to take away the fact that we're invoicing it. So we take away the fact that we are counting the kilowatt hours, putting a price to it, and sending an invoice to whoever consumed it, and the credit note to whoever provided the electricity. But just the pure data of the charging sessions also is amazing stuff that's going on. So one thing that we see is that the duration of charging very often is not changing, although you might think so. So, for example, en route charging at DC chargers typically takes 23 minutes in average.
Okay.
Yeah. Because that's the time it takes to connect your car, go to the toilet, have a cup of coffee, check some emails, And then I'm quite sure if you would look at the data, you could see who's a smoker and a non-smoker, because whoever smokes probably stays 2 more minutes statistically. So one thing that we have seen is what we call the 30-minute economy, so that you can actually, when you have charging in the game, you can actually tailor everything that's around the charger to a nice 30-minute stay, whether it's a haircut or whether it's a meal or whatever, is the second question. So that's what comes from the data of the
very interesting.
Yeah.
So that's the average time spent on en-route chargers.
Yeah.
23, 24 minutes.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay, so not regardless of state of charge.
Yes.
That's the average.
You got the point.
Oh, okay.
You precisely got the point. And that was something that surprised me when I first looked at this, because I thought, okay, it's going to be shorter because we have higher power. So when the 150 kilowatt was superseded by 200 or 300, I was expecting that you have statistically shorter charging times. But sometimes yes, but mostly you just see that the power that goes into the car is more because we've got more power. But the time frame, but it's logical. If you think about, I'm not going somewhere to charge normally. I'm charging where I go. So I take a break, and if you take a break for the car, it's going to be around 20 minutes.
20 minutes, 25 minutes. Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Another question that I have asked a lot of other experts is about power grid. Power grid, availability of capacity, and when it comes to software, ability of chargers to speak with the grid and vice versa.
Yeah.
So that's a big topic. Oftentimes, it is discussed that power grid is a resource that obviously is going to facilitate e-mobility, but it can become a bottleneck as well. It can actually become a roadblock for e-mobility. How do you see this? Whose role is it? Where do DSOs come into this equation? And also from a software point of view, what's the role from a grid operator and someone such as yourself? So how do you see role from different stakeholders in this regard of grid speaking to the chargers and vice versa?
Yeah. So I'm going to disappoint you a lot because I can't talk about setting up chargers. That's not what we do. That's what our customers do, set up the chargers. We can only provide the software in here. So however that is done, whoever provides the low voltage, high voltage grid and how do you
connection.
That's something our customers are doing. Once the charger is installed, we provide the software, and then of course we can do a lot of things to provide the best value for our customers who are the CPOs, and provide them with the possibility to, for example, load management dynamically or statically, to provide signals towards the grid operator to keep their investment low. We've heard today about how easily you can actually shoot your limit for certain periods of times, 1 year, and next year you have to pay more for your grid connection. So these things need to be managed, and that all, again, we're coming back to the fact that this is managed through the software by following up and then providing the correct mechanisms.
Right. Moving forward towards another question of utilization of chargers, that's something that's discussed a lot.
Yeah.
That having a utilization rate above a certain threshold, I don't know what that threshold is, gives you the business case for EV charging, right? So how do you see this? There is maybe a little bit of an uptick on the utilization rates in Europe. What do you think? There can be more strategic placement of chargers. I know you mentioned that you're not involved in that, but what role can be played by anyone who's installing the chargers to ensure that utilization? Because I think at the end of the day, it's the business case is how much are you utilizing your charger. So what can be done to maybe increase the utilization other than obvious thing, which is the EV, having more EVs on the road?
Yeah. So utilization, again, is very seasonal. So we see this in the numbers, holiday season. Again, we have to be careful. We have 80% of charging sessions that happen at home and at the workplace. Just thinking about myself, how often do I charge on a public charger? Let it be 20 times per year. Yeah, and it's not more. It's not more, because that's the only times when I'm actually going somewhere. Yeah, I might be an extreme because, of course, I have charging at home and at my workplace. If one of them is missing, then it might be a little different. But from a utilization standpoint, we have on the one hand, of course, the seasons. So holiday seasons, we see huge surges in utilization in public charging infrastructure. But also, how can utilization is going to go up with more cars. And also not to forget that EVs at the moment are still something for higher income people, and they very often have off-street parking. So concepts to provide charging for people who don't have access to off-street parking is something that we need to make absolutely sure that it happens, and that it make absolutely sure that it's affordable and available. Yeah, and then you'll also see these peaks in utilization.
Got it.
Question: are we going to go to high power charging hubs within cities? Yeah, maybe. I don't know, because it's not my job. I just have to make sure that if somebody installs one of those, that they will be usable and that they will be accessible, that they'll be running.
Got it. One last question on, I know you mentioned that you're responsible for European market. If you were to tell us some of the key differences between European and North American market. One difference that I learned from an EV user point of view the other day was that somebody did a study that European market is very much relatively more forgiving end users. That's what I learned. Very interesting. Compared to US, for example, that's where, and that from here stems the topic of having more reliability. So that's why it becomes a big topic maybe in the US. The end users are not very forgiving, for example. So that's one. Do you see key differences between these two markets, other than the fact maybe the regulatory landscape is not that cohesive?
Yeah, but that's another discussion, and then we can spend days on the regulatory differences. Yeah. So one major difference, of course, is ChargePoint is the major player in the US EV charging market. Yeah, not a CPO. We are never the CPO. I can't emphasize that enough. Our customers are the CPO, but a huge amount of chargers, a large percentage of chargers in the US is ChargePoint branded, and we operate and is operated by our customers. But the brand is ChargePoint. The app that people use is ChargePoint. So customers perceive us very often as being responsible for keeping these chargers running, which we are in many cases. We provide also the servicing. In the US, from a customer standpoint, you're right, they're not as forgiving in the US. And also the US very often don't have this first mover bonus. When you think about how this was working 8 years ago, 7 years ago in Europe, people who were driving EVs were first movers. So they thought it was fun, it was challenging to know which car works where. And nowadays, many people who drive EVs simply rely on the EV for their mobility. So that's one maybe difference between the two markets. The US market is structured very differently when it comes to roaming. Yeah, we have very few people who actually act as an MSP in the US. There's only direct roaming connections. Why? Because ChargePoint has set up the market that way in the market position in the US. Here in Europe, we rely on roaming connections, roaming marketplaces, and so on. So the whole thing becomes more complex and more complicated to solve. Yeah. So that's also right.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Andreas. It has been a pleasure speaking with you, and I'm sure that our listeners and viewers got a lot of insights from our discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The pleasure was all mine.
Thank you.